when you think about making behavioral changes, it's really about how do you set up a world where not making the change is distressing enough to shift the behavior.
Hey, Dave, we're back.
Hey, Rob, how are you? How was the holiday?
It was good. It was good. I had a lot of holiday parties to go to, talk to a lot of relatives, hang out with a lot of friends. It was a good time. How about yourself?
It was good. I went to California, saw family, which was wonderful, and then my brothers, their families came out to visit me in Colorado afterwards for a nice ski week. We spent a ton of money to rent an Airbnb in the mountains, and then we promptly all got the norovirus, and so there's 10 or 12 of us that were vomiting. And it does feel good to vomit in a really expensive Airbnb. So at least we had lots of bathrooms to throw up in. I would say I would give it a C+ globally.
Did you get charged an extra cleaning fee?
We did. Better people than me and my family left tips for the cleaning people.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we paid a little extra.
But yeah. That makes sense.
And my kids, just as a side note, I just feel like I have to say, my kids who are 9 and 6, I think in total probably threw up 10 times between the two of them.
Oh my!
0 times did they puke in a trash can or a toilet. Like all over the car, no problem. All over the bed, no problem. Their sleeping bags, no problem. Our pillows, no problem.
Oh my!
All over our house. We came home from this expensive Airbnb to our home, and then they ruined all of our sheets and mattresses. And so it's a wonderful experience, bonding experience. Memorable is a better way to say it.
Yeah. Yes, it sounds that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's gross.
Yeah,
that's gross. We just had. I think I could have just had the same thing. Starting on Friday, as you know, it was not a great experience. Then my son, he started puking yesterday, but we got some Zofran in him pretty quick. He puked in his bed.
Oh.
And by his bed, I mean he spent the night at my parents' house. He and my daughter spent the night at my parents' house on Friday.
Nice.
So he puked in the bed of my parents' house. So that kind of sucked.
So no waterproof mattress sheet.
No, I'll have to ask them. At our house, we put under his bed still. There was like a hospital pad so that if he were like wet the bed or something like that, it wouldn't get on the mattress.
Yes.
I'll have to had that at theirs.
Yeah, that was a lifesaver for us.
Yes.
We had that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it must be going around. Well, that sucks. During the holidays, I know I got a lot of questions from my family members who listen to our show here about this is show more broadly. Some of the episodes we've done recently about politics and about kind of managing family through the holidays. Did you get have any conversations with your family about that?
Did not get a lot about like the managing. For some reason that they weren't bothered by my comments about the family. They sort of go like, oh, he's talking about somebody else, not us. I did get a lot of comments about you in particular. They were concerned with your political orientation. Both sides of the aisle concerned that you were too extreme on whatever was opposite of theirs. and was there a way for me to sort of set you straight?
Intervene and save me?
Yes. Okay. That's right. You need saving.
Uh-huh. I did get some specific commentary about you there as well, which is interesting. I mean, maybe because my family members know me, and so they expect some, certain things from me, but they don't know you, and so they were making a lot of assumptions. This is the thought process that was going through my head. But the same thing about you is, people on the left certainly think that, he's certainly talking about us. Like, this is a good thing. And then my relatives on the right, he's certainly talking about us. This is a good thing. Having no idea where you actually fall. So it was kind of fun. But yours was the other side. It was like, as opposed to my family, I heard like they're both kind of like, he's talking about us. Yours,
Yeah,
They
dissatisfied
need
with
like,
it.
yeah, dissatisfied. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
can tell he doesn't really think what he's saying, or I can, he's he's not fooling us. He really feels this way.
Oh, God, I
Yeah,
think that explains so much about you too, right?
just
Just
the
yeah, just
skeptical
that
orientation.
guarded, yeah, that guarded kind of questioning of things. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Well, I do want to dive a bit deeper into this because our topic for today is inspired by my family get together. So, for one of my Christmas celebrations, one of my aunts, having listened to our political shows, and she knows me again, she knows me pretty well, and said, "Well, do you believe what you're saying?" I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, I know you, and particularly when you were younger, you had some pretty strong beliefs, and how you're describing yourself now is a bit more nuanced, and you're trying to be a bit more understanding of people who had different perspectives." And I'm saying this in my own words, but what she was essentially saying is, "Do you believe that?"
It
And
sounds
I
like
said, "Go
it sounds
ahead."
like she was surprised that you are tolerant. You
I think so.
you used to have strong views and you wouldn't listen to anybody. Now it sounds like you're open-minded,
Right.
which I'm really concerned about.
Right. I think I was less concerned about the open mindedness. I think she just was like trying to call bullshit on me. She's like, "Nah, you don't believe that shit. You're just trying to present yourself in a certain way."
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Which again makes sense, as I think I've said on the show before. If people who have known me for a long time, and maybe even up till 7, 8 years ago, she would have been right.
Mhm,
Um, but I think for a lot of reasons, uh, particularly in part of like the work, because of the work that we do, I've started to shift my mindset into one that's a bit more trying to understand as opposed to judging.
mhm,
Um, but it got me to think about just kind of a small, really narrow question, which is, do people change?
mm,
That
that'll be
small
simple.
question that
Yeah.
not many people have really thought about before. Uh,
Mhm.
no, a question that people have written hundreds, if not thousands, of books about, that there are tons of articles and podcasts and stuff about. So I realized that bringing up this topic, we're going to just skim the surface on this
Mhm,
topic, Dave. I have a couple of questions for you I want to get through. So this is not going to be a 12-hour show that talks about every facet of change. Um, and it may be something we talk about again in the future, but that's what I like to talk to you about in the spirit of my conversation with my family, in the spirit of the new year, where people oftentimes want to change things about them or to put a stake in the ground. Hey, this is what I'm going to change. I thought we'd talk about change today.
perfect. I'm ready for it.
All right.
My
So,
answer is yes.
yes, your answer is yes. What?
People change. I vote
Oh,
they do change.
all right. Well, me too. So, I
Solved.
guess
That's
guess we're
easy.
done. All right,
Yeah.
it was easy. All right. See you, everyone. No. I think, yeah, and I think that's the easy part for me. Although when I've over the past couple of weeks, when I've tested this with a couple of friends and family members, there were some people who reacted, "No, I don't think people change. I think people who are the way that they are."
Mhm,
I've certainly
mhm,
heard that. Have you heard
mhm.
that from people that
Absolutely.
you are okay?
And I think, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but I think there are, when you say change, there is like, do you change the way you speak, or do you change you know, your global personality? There are different levels of change.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It does make me think. I wonder. So we both quickly came to people change, and maybe it's unfair because we deal with human behavior in kind of an almost daily basis.
And our
Why do you think?
jobs. Like if you think
Right,
about what
that's what I
you and I
mean.
do,
Yeah, yeah,
is to help people change.
yeah. So we're biased there a little bit because we see it at times. Why do you think people are so quick at times to think that people don't change?
That's a good question.
Because
I
I think that
think,
that is something out there.
yeah. Well, I think it is. Well, I think it's probably self-serving. it's easy. It's easier. It's the cognitive load of your social interactions is more straightforward, less burdensome if you just assume that everybody is, stable and consistent and won't change. If you assume that people are dynamic and can be different from
Yeah.
one year to the next, then it's there's a cognitive load you have to carry to sort of figure out how you want to navigate your relationships.
Hmm. That makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, in other words, it's more complex, right? People are more complex, and it's easier for us in general to just think, all right, I know this person, I'm going to peg them this way, and that's who they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think the question we'd ask is, can people change? We both said yes.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to rephrase it and say, do people change? Not always.
Right. I agree. I
And
agree with you.
so maybe I think that's what I was thinking is people also have experiences that maybe stick in their heads of
Mm-hmm.
times that people in their lives didn't change.
Yeah.
And for
Yeah. I
some
mean,
reason,
I,
that's
I
more
if you
memorable.
ask me what's more likely that somebody changes or that they don't, I would say more likely they don't change. You
Yeah.
know, and if you think about it from like a therapeutic standpoint or like a relationship counseling standpoint, I would never tell someone go ahead get in a relationship with someone who you've got that's got some things that you don't like with the hope that they're going to change. Like
Right.
that's a bad strategy.
Right. That's like the basis for every other sitcom that has ever existed about relationships is
Yeah.
getting involved with someone who you think you can change. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's part of it too, just people's experiences.
Hmm.
More often than not, they find people don't change.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so if we're going to talk about change, yeah, let's define what it is. So I think you're right. I think what we're going to talk about here is it's a bit more complex than just saying yes or no. Um, I think things that are easier to change or things that can be easier to change are behaviors and habits. And
Hmm.
this is where I think you and I in our day jobs play a bit more. It's like, we're not necessarily changing anyone's, and I'll get into this a little bit later on, their personalities. But
Right.
what we are helping them understand is here are some of your tendencies.
Hmm.
Knowing that, how do you want to show up where you are at work? And what adjustments, if any, do you think you should make in order to achieve these goals? What are some of the behaviors that you could change? Is that
Hmm. Hmm.
how you
Yeah.
would describe it? Okay.
Yeah.
And so, in that respect, I think people can change a bit easier. But then you get at more complex topics like your belief systems, whatever that is,
Hmm.
or your personality,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
I think inherent in most definitions of personality is a bit more stable
Yes.
across situations and time. Those things are not easily changed. And maybe you know a bit more about this than I do, but as an organizational psychologist, I think we tend to study that as a bit more of a stable trait. Is that how you would describe it with your background as well?
Yeah, barring significant life events,
Yep.
trauma, that kind of stuff, personality. I think about it like your personality. I mean, certainly we don't, I think there's probably not a universal agreement on what the split is between nature versus nurture.
Yep.
But by the time you hit, I think the number that I see most is like 23. Once you're an adult, your personality and style of moving through the world um, is pretty constant, not a lot of
Hmm.
movement.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you think about it this way, it's adaptive by that stage of the game. I am this way, whether it's being more introverted or being more conscientious or being more flexible or even being nervous about things. The way I view the world will be that those characteristics protect me in some way.
Yeah.
This is how I find success. Over the last 23 years it's worked, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yep. That makes a ton of sense. So for the purposes of our conversation today, I want to focus more on those first two things that I mentioned, behaviors and habits as things that people can change,
Yep.
as opposed to diving a bit deeper into belief systems and personalities and stuff like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So as I think of it, and when someone says, do people change? And I say yes, there's a couple of different criteria that I go through, though, that help me say, but this, and this has to happen. So one thing that has to happen is, again, someone has to want to change. Oh, let me take a quick sidetrack. This reminds me of a joke. You've heard this joke. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb, Dave?
I think I know the answer.
Say it.
The answer is that the light bulb has to want to change.
Yeah.
Is
One,
that
but
right?
the light bulb has to want to change.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's how it goes. Yeah, but change. But yeah, I think there is something to that, right? When we think of change, there has to be a desire to change. Maybe this is too simple, but I see it as this kind of two-part process. There has to be a desire to change, some incentive to do it, and then some know-how related to it. Like, all right, and then here's how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you think about change that way?
I think that that's right. I think like in the clinical world, there's I would say again, I've been out of the game as a therapist for a long time, but when I was in school 12 years ago, the most common sort of way of talking about it was motivational interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was not that you would, the example I got was if you were a smoker and I said to you, Rob, you need to stop smoking right now. Smoking kills you. You're going to get cancer. It's ugly. It's going to age you faster. Your fingernails are going to be yellow. You're never going to learn how to deal with anxiety without you're going to be dependent on it. Your reaction to that, barrage of concerns would make you want to go smoke a cigarette and calm your nerves. Like, that doesn't work to just say do it. But what does work is asking people questions that get them to decide on their own that they want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like thinking about how do you frame things so that people move incrementally down the sort of the line from contemplating the idea of making a change to I'm ready to act on it. And that's the sort of the trick of getting someone on their own to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and yeah, cigarette smoking is a good example of that. That I could also imagine is a bit even more difficult because there's a biological component and a kind of a chemical reaction to some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I even think of like simpler changes. Like, all right, I'm going to stop. Like for me, like how do I stop snacking at night? How do I stop, Cookie Monster and Goldfish crackers from the hours of 9 to 11 p.m. before I go to bed? Yeah, that's difficult.
Yes.
Right. That's how do I stop doing that? I know I should. Mm-hmm. Here are the things that I've tried, but at the end of the day, I'm still doing it. Why do I still do this?
So this may be too far in the weeds, but think about it like if I said to you, when you Cookie Monster goldfish, before you go to bed, it's really bad for you. You're going to gain weight. You're going to bloat because of all the salt, right? You'd be like, geez,
I'd be like, yes, and yes.
I could really go for a goldfish right now.
Right.
Instead, it would be better if I asked you, what do you like about eating goldfish? Have you thought about not eating goldfish? Is there anything like what other things might you eat instead of goldfish? Are there ways that you could avoid, right? If I just sort of have you think about it and pragmatically problem solve, you're more likely to move down that line to go from contemplating the idea to being like, that's it. I'm not going to eat another freaking goldfish. And here's my plan of action to make it harder to eat goldfish.
Right. I think the other thing, and this goes back to the work that we do as well, is, not only can someone just telling you all the negative side effects be stress inducing, and then you go back to that coping mechanism of eating or smoking or whatever it is. But for some other people, it kind of takes their own sense of, self out of it because someone's telling them what to do, and it's less of them being part of the solution to their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, you and I do a lot of coaching, and that's part of what we do as well is, hey, we may know an answer to a question. If someone were to ask us specifically, hey, how do you stop smoking or, Cookie Monster and Goldfish crackers? We say, do those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not their idea. And I think there's some research out there that would suggest if it's someone's idea, and this is related to motivational interviewing, they're a bit more likely to follow through with that than if it's someone else's idea. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way more likely. And I would even say that that extends beyond behavior change. But if you talk about like how does somebody gain confidence, or how does somebody reduce anxiety, anything about how somebody sees themselves and the world around them,
Hmm.
just telling them what to do, or uh, giving them feedback is less likely to move the needle than if they can change the way they see themselves and make the
Right.
decision.
Right.
Which is, by the
Uh,
way, is way easier said than done.
of course, because then otherwise everyone would do it pretty easily.
Yeah. Yep.
So, so again, I think we're going back to the difficulty here. Even though we do this and we see it work, we oftentimes see it not work
Mm-hmm.
as well. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons I've come up with in my research for our conversation today has come up as well is, you know, there's a stream of difficulty here. In other words, I may know that I want to change. I may know how to do it, but it's difficult, right? I may know I need to get new shoes. Well, it can be easier if I have $50 in a spare hour to go get new shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of this is the knowing and doing gap, right? There's, especially when we're talking about some of those more difficult habits to change, like smoking, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know we need to do something different,
Mm-hmm.
and we may even know the steps to take, and we may come up with those steps. But that's a difficult habit to change because, again, I'm not an expert here. I'd imagine no, but the biological and kind of chemical reactions that nicotine has with our body is the addiction associated with it. It's a lot more difficult than me saying I need to go, buy a new pair of shoes. I know how to do that, and I have $50. I can go do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I would even say I think it's more than just the biological piece. If you think about any kind of, whenever there's the gap between the knowing and doing, at least from a clinical standpoint, what I think is important is for people to realize that at some level, whatever they're doing feels like it's adaptive. So even if it's things like eating, or if it's like not working out, or if it's like you can imagine like not journaling, or sleeping too, whatever the behavior is that you're trying to change, we all know how to do it. The
Yep.
reason why we don't do it is because at some level, the thing we're doing feels like it's the right thing. I get to sleep in more. It tastes really good to eat the goldfish. I'm really tired. I don't want to go work out. And you have, like in my mind, you have to find a way to make doing the thing, making the change, feel more adaptive, feel better than whatever it's giving you, right? Like,
Right.
it, I'm not. If you think about
The scales
smoking,
have
for
to
example,
shift, right? So
right,
there has, yeah,
I think whenever you think about behavior, you're running the equation. If I
yeah,
smoke this cigarette, I'm going to feel good, and that feeling of good is going to be better than the distress the shame I'm going to feel for having smoked that cigarette. So I'm going to continue to do it.
yeah.
When you got to make the pendulum swing where the shame you feel, or the health you feel, or the happiness you feel makes that better than the feeling of smoking the cigarette.
Well, and that's what I want to talk a bit more about because again, people can know they can want to do it, they can know how to do it, but they don't do it. And again, we've encountered that. But why are there other reasons besides that, especially that come from your perspective? I have some ideas from like the organizational psychology space why that happens. So why people might want to change and know they should but don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What else would you say about that? Any other reasons why?
I think, let me think. I think there's also, I think people oftentimes aren't very intentional. I guess I have a couple of
Yes.
thoughts. I think sometimes people aren't very intentional, and we have these. I think this comes from the famous book is Habits. I think the author's name is James Clear, but I could have that wrong.
Okay.
But our behavior, we don't think through every decision we make all day. Like every day I wake up and I do the exact same things. I get up, I go get a cup of coffee,
Hmm.
I make the kids breakfast, I yell at them to get dressed for school. My wife and I make the kids lunch, right? It's the same thing every single day. And so if you were to say, hey, David, I want you to do whatever, work out in the morning. Well, it's really hard to do that if I've got this chain of things that I always
Yeah.
do because I don't think about it. And so when we talk about changing behaviors, one thing we can do is sort of figure out how do we get a whole new chain of behaviors
Yep.
that will lead to this new change.
Yep.
I think one of it is the lack of intentionality. And I also think the other one is people don't always clock the way in which their behaviors serve them. So, for
Right.
example,
In the moment in particular. Yeah.
right. So if it's the goldfish, you might be thinking, oh, well, I'm just eating the goldfish because it tastes good. It might also be soothing to you. It's
Yeah.
familiar to you. It's right. And if we don't know all the things that it's, all the ways in which it's serving us, it's hard to solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day you're like, freaking goldfish looks good right now, you know?
Yes, I agree with all that. And it is very, I believe it very personally for all those reasons now that we're talking about
I
goldfish.
love, by the way, that you're like the sorted behavior you have is that you eat too many goldfish.
No, that's just the one I'm willing to share on this podcast,
Okay.
Dave.
All right. By the way, I have a similar pattern, which is I do a lot of work at night. I like to work at night,
Mm-hmm.
and I always need a coffee. So I have a coffee.
You do
Doesn't
drink
matter.
a ton of coffee.
I love it's
And then you drink
and that
decaf.
what?
Oh, you drink decaf, which
Oh yeah.
almost seems
It's
not worth it.
it's if I, it's such a and I think for example, it's not that I need the caffeine. I think I need the caffeine, but it's not that I want like right now I have coffee. I think not because I need a boost of energy, but it's a soothing, it's warm, it's familiar. Like there's something about it that like quiets my soul. And I like that. Quiet, I don't know if it's quiets my soul, whatever. It feels good. And but then what I like to have is if you're gonna have coffee, like you need a little something to snack on along with it. And so there's that like that
Mm-hmm.
chain of behaviors for me is if I have a coffee and it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm working, could really go with a cookie along with that coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Or a little chocolate, if you have a little chocolate and the coffee, it really, and I think that for
Yep.
me, the distress of working is less distressing if I get to enjoy this little treat alongside my work.
Right.
You know
If
what I
you
mean?
pair it.
If I pair it. And so
Yes.
it's really hard for that. I've got those two behaviors linked in a negative way.
So I'll agree with you there, and maybe this is different. And you can this is another example that's related to food. So you and others will know a bit more about how I reward myself and maybe some of the struggles I've had in my life as a result. Uh, but I remember in college when, let's just say, I wasn't at my healthiest, like most people are when they're in their early 20s. I was actually like the least healthy I ever was in my life.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that I would do during finals, particularly my junior and senior year, I would get. I went to a college town, and there was a place in this town that had really good pizza. I would order an extra large pizza for myself, and I would allow like for like the 3 days or so that and these extra large pizzas weren't like 16 inch. It was like a 20 something inch pizza. Like it wouldn't fit into the fridge in my apartment, so I had to take it out and put it in other things to put it in the fridge. Like it wasn't a small pizza,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and it wasn't a thin crust pizza either. It was thick as hell. So I would reward myself after having studied for a couple of hours by shoving pizza
A slice of pizza.
into not no, a slice.
Okay.
Slices of pizza.
Okay.
So that by the end of this, I had eaten what was probably a pizza for like 6 people. I had eaten over the course of just 3 days all by myself. But it was again a
Yeah.
reward. Like I do this thing, I meet this goal that I have of studying for
Yep.
2 or 3 hours. Then I shove pizza in my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, there is some of that. I was going to say something else. Now I've
Wait, but
gone off on
how'd you
pizza.
change the behavior? How'd you stop? Or I don't think I've ever seen you buy an extra large piece or huge pizza and eat it. So how'd you stop the behavior?
Well, I think one was just getting out of college, and so
Oh,
it
so
changed.
that breaks the
So
pattern.
so I think it's a good segue to the last thing I was going to say, which is there's situation or context in which we find ourselves that I also think can cause us to not change or cause us to change. So in this situation, leaving college, leaving that town, and coming back to St. Louis for grad school, I changed my environment. That was one thing. Second thing is I looked at all of my college graduation photos, and it was not great.
Mm-hmm.
My look was not great. As a 22-year-old, my health stats were not great. And I just looked at myself and I'm like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there was, but I had always known that. Um, so I think certainly the shift in situation, it was almost like a fresh start, different phase of life, doing something different
Does
that
it?
helped.
Did it also? I mean, a part of that also has to have been how you saw yourself changed, right?
Yeah.
From I mean, if you identified as somebody that was overweight as a college student
Yeah.
and eating the pizza, sort of like, well, this is what Rob does.
Yep.
But if you're in graduate school and now you're like, I'm going to be a psychologist, I'm a mental health professional. Like, does the future? Do you think that
Hmm.
impacted your ability to go like, this is not what I need to do?
That's a good question. I had never thought about that before. Like, did kind of looking a bit ahead change? It certainly could have. I'd have to think through that more. I think it was probably at least from what I can remember, a lot more surface level than that, which was change in situation, and I look terrible,
Yeah.
and I feel terrible,
Yeah.
so it's time to change.
Yep.
But I do think the situation, the context, is important to change because, again, and I'm talking about me, but I could say, I know that I need to change. I know how to do it, but for some reason, my environment does not allow me to make that change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or I can think of um, examples where if I'm the only one who changes and I'm in a family that does one thing and they want, and I want to do something else, well, that's more difficult to do because now there's those familiar group constraints.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be out. I want to be on the outskirts. I want to be in with the group. And so I may be less likely to change, even though I know I should. I know how to do it.
And oftentimes the people that are in that inner circle with you will be equally unhealthy, and then they will push back on you if you try and make the change, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
if you think about more extreme examples, if you're a substance
Mm-hmm.
abuser and the people around you are abusing substances, when you go, "Hey, I'm going to be sober," their reaction is less likely. It's unlikely their reaction is going to be, "Hey, good for you. I'm proud of you. Let me eliminate all the substances so that you don't see it." Their
Yeah.
reaction is going to be, "Hey, what are you doing? You're not going to be different than us." And they're going to give you a hard time. And you're going to feel like not only are you giving up the substance, but now you're also giving up your friend group and you're
Yep.
giving up your social activities. You're giving up your identity in a lot of ways. And so it makes the change very difficult if you're around the wrong sort of structure.
Yep. So I think that's also a critical component of these types of behavioral changes and habit changes that we're talking about is, well, what does your environment look like? And
Mm-hmm.
is it helping or hindering you from being able to make these changes that you know you need to make?
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking a lot about kind of these individual changes and kind of, individual dynamic changes. I actually, way back when, this is what, Jesus, 12 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote my dissertation on factors that predict resistance to organizational changes. So, why do people resist changes inside of their workplace?
Mm-hmm.
And there was, there's a couple of things, right? There's just some personality characteristics related to that, which again, we're not going to get into all that. But one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting there is what's in it for me, right? Is this change, do I perceive or believe that this change is going to help me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make my life easier. Am I going to get paid more because of this, whatever it is? Then I may be more likely to change something.
Right.
And if I feel like it's not, then why would I want to change?
Uh-huh. Which makes sense. Yep.
Right. Um, Another thing that I found interesting there, and this is research that's been done as well, is that it was updated when I wrote my dissertation, is I probably assumed that there was a relationship between someone's age and someone's resistance to change at work. Is that a thing that you would agree with as well, or no?
I would not. Well, so it's interesting because if you I guess intuitive. I think I would agree. I would not have thought of that. It makes sense that as you age, you become less flexible, right? If you
Mhm.
told me, hey, there's a 70-year-old, are they going to make massive changes? I would say,
Mhm.
at that point, you have your idiosyncrasies, and you're not really going to move the needle. Versus someone in their
Yeah.
20s, more comfortable pivoting. So I guess it makes intuitive sense that as you got older, harder to make. I get so I would agree. I guess I wouldn't have put a lot of stock on that in the sort of the business world.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought.
So it's a trick question. That's not
Oh,
necessarily true, Dave.
oh,
So
it's not
direct
true.
direct all your comments to Dave. I think it can
Oh
be.
no.
Uh but I think what's different is we're looking at a correlation. So in general, if you're older, it's more likely that you've been in your role for a long time. And what actually predicts resistance more is tenure in role
Okay, that
than
makes sense.
age.
So how
So the
ingrained
longer I've
habits
been
are.
doing something, yeah. So I could be 40 years old, having done something for 15 years, or 50 years old and having done a role for 2 years, and I would be less likely to resist as a 50-year-old in that situation than the 40-year-old in that
Got it.
situation.
And that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Right. And it makes sense in part because, again, we get into grooves.
Mhm.
And so I may have less of an incentive to change if I'm doing the same thing over and over again and I'm good with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas if I am a new employee in a new organization, my mindset has shifted. I'm ready. I'm assuming that I'm going to be learning new things and doing new things, and I'm going to have to make some adjustments. And so, again, that's more of those situational factors, I think,
Yeah.
that we talked about earlier that can open up someone's perspective a bit more.
So when you were talking about this though, it seems like there's an assumed difference between how an individual changes versus how someone in an organization
Right.
changes. And I guess you have to walk me through it because I'm not sure if I agree with
Yeah,
that or not.
I think you're right. I don't think there's a difference. I'm I misspoke there. I think it is more the context. So I think that's probably what I wanted to say is, these things happen individually with people just living their lives, and they happen in certain contexts, and maybe they manifest themselves in different ways,
Mhm. Mhm.
like in organizations. And everything about organizational changes, sometimes you have less control over that.
So okay, but let me just here's the question: is it should intuitively it feels like it would be easier to make organizational change because people are less it's less personal. So there's less likely to be some kind of psychological dynamic at play that makes this negative behavior adaptive. Instead, at work, isn't it just like this makes work more efficient, or I like this way? But is there less likely to be an ingrained behavior that's difficult to change?
Well, again, if we go back to incentives, I think it
Uh,
depends on what the incentive is. So it can be pretty ingrained if I think that what I'm going to do is making me less efficient and then can make me less money, then I'm going to resist it. I think if
uh-huh.
I'm going to have less power or influence, I may resist it more if that's something that's important to me. I think for me personally, this isn't a organizational change, but just a preference that's based on my personality. Like working remotely 100% when we had to do that during
Mhm.
COVID. Oh my God, that was terrible.
Yeah.
And so that was a change that was thrusted upon me that I had to do, which I understand, cognitively I understood, but emotionally that sucked.
Yeah. Well,
And so a
when you
change happened that affected me that I had no control over and I hated it.
when you said that along with like the power piece, those are still psychological
Yeah.
mechanisms at play, whether or not it's at work or at home.
Right.
If you're someone who wants to feel like you have agency and control and authority,
Yep.
uh, and there's a big change that takes it away from you, you're going to push back pretty hard at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably some individual differences there that some people may push back more so than others. But in general, I think most people want to have that sense of agency and control. And when threatened with not having that, they're at the very least not going to be very happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So your dissertation was on the barriers, so things that get in the way of change at
yeah,
work.
it was a spoiler alert. What I thought was going to impact change above and beyond what had already been established did not end up working out.
Oh wait, what was it?
So I looked at a factor, uh, a construct called political skill. So someone's kind of social astuteness in the workplace,
Uh-huh.
assuming that the more socially astute you were, and assuming that this change was actually beneficial for the organization, that people who were higher in that individual difference or that characteristic would be more open to change because they would find a way to make it better for them,
And
because
that
they
was
would
wrong?
understand that they would align to that change. It
Yeah.
did not come up in my research. It did not. It had no effect.
Hold
Now,
on.
the change I measured was in a hospital setting, a transition from traditional to electronic medical records. So it could have been what I had studied was not the right thing to study to get at that.
And how
My
did you
population
measure?
was nurses, and it was not only nurses, but like overwhelmingly nursing staff. And
Uh-huh.
so maybe there's something specific about that population that wouldn't have allowed this to come up as a finding. But there was just I had folks complete a number of different questionnaires. One of the questionnaires was an inventory around political skill.
It's interesting. Did you? Was it? That's. I would have agreed with you that
Yeah.
that characteristic would have led to more agility. I mean, definitely more social agility, but it didn't.
Yeah. So there's probably something else in there that
Yeah.
I didn't account for that could have affected, because I think just logically it makes sense. But
It does. Well, I wonder, but you didn't do. I don't want to get too far in the weeds on it, but you didn't do appraisals of political astuteness. You did self-report. Am I
yeah.
politically astute?
Yeah.
So I wonder if I wonder if,
Sure.
right, I might think I'm real savvy and everybody hates me.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right. So given the conversation, Dave, I think we've hinted on this already, but I'd like to ask, so especially in the spirit of the new year, in the spirit of many people that are listening to this, putting some stake in the ground, saying that they want to make some change in behavior or habit, assuming this is actually true, what would you recommend that they do to make it stick?
I think that you need to make the consequence of not making the change uh, very significant, significant enough that it's distressing for you not to make the change. So, for example, I have, and I again, with this year, will have the resolution that I need to work out and eat healthier. I
How
would
do you
like
say
to
again? How many years in a row has this been your resolution?
is since I was 15.
Okay.
And since I was 15, I would love to put on 10 pounds of muscle and I'd love to lose 5 pounds of fat. I'd love to
Okay.
make that happen. And,
Okay.
now that I'm in my 40s, it's a little bit more difficult to just put on 10 pounds. I don't know. I'm not saying it's realistic, but I would like to change my body composition a little
Okay.
bit. You
Okay.
seen Brad Pitt in Fight Club? That's that's the look I'm going for. Okay. So,
You guys were probably the same age, right? You're probably the age now he was in Fight Club, if that makes you
yeah.
feel better.
Yeah. So, so, um, there's some work that needs to be done. But I think the reason why I never change my eating behaviors and I never change my fitness routine is there's no significant consequence to me not doing it. Right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
look at the mirror and go, "Oh my god, this is intolerable." I feel okay. I don't think, knock on wood, that my wife is going to leave me if I don't lose 5 pounds.
Yep.
But if you told me Allison's going to leave you if you don't change your body composition, I think I would immediately change the behavior. And
Yep.
so I think when you think about making behavioral changes, it's really about how do you set up a world where not making the change is distressing enough to shift the behavior. So
Yeah.
like things that you can do would be have an accountability partner. You know, if I had to post on this, I'm not doing this for the record, but if I had to post on our social media what I ate every day, and I was going to get just thrashed by our audience for eating unhealthy, I bet you I would change the behavior immediately, right? And so I think
Uh-huh.
that's the thing is you have to go, okay, like what? So I have two New Year's resolutions. One is to change my body composition, lift weights, eat healthier, and I think did I tell you I was going to change my aesthetic, my clothing aesthetic.
No, what? No more hoodies?
I'm gonna so
Because you're wearing one now, so it's
I've got
2025.
wait. This is I thought this seemed more mature than my hoodie. No,
Oh, yes, David. It looks
I
extremely mature.
so I have a brother. I really thought this was part of my new aesthetic. So I have a brother who is an attorney, and he wears collared shirts all the time. And I go like, man, how are you all like? He had norovirus and is vomiting in a collared shirt, and I go like, how are you always? You know, you always look like you're put together. And he says, you want to have a coherent brand. It's I don't want to have to think about what am I supposed to wear. I want to look a certain way all the time. And I at the time I was wearing a hoodie and like oversized plaid half sweat shorts, you know, that were like down to my calves. And I was like, oh, I feel so immature because he's 7 years younger than I am. And he was like, well, David, that's been that look, the eighth grade, you
Right.
know, just roll out
Tony
of brick.
Hawk.
That has been your
Yeah,
look
about
for
to
a long time.
skateboard Tony Hawk look. Yeah.
And I think I need to adjust that. So
Okay.
anyway, I'm making an effort to change my aesthetic.
Oh,
It was a
wow. All
long-winded
right.
answer.
Well, we will
What
be
about
able to
you?
see that visually.
Yes.
Um, so my New Year's resolution is better sleep habits. So, like you, I am a night owl. Some of the time I spend at night staying up is, for to do things that can be helpful, like getting work done or doing stuff around the house. And sometimes I'm up till midnight binge watching a show when I have to get up at 6 a.m.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and this, I've always been a bit of a night owl, but I feel like this past year has gotten worse. So, um, so to answer the question I mentioned to you, like how to actually make a change in habits, I think you mentioned this is accountability buddies or something like that. So my wife will be that person for me. I think
Uh-huh.
she'll be very excited because she is someone who has to go to bed much earlier than I do.
Yeah.
And so as a result, either I piss her off because there's light in the room or noise and she can't sleep, even though she can take naps during the day. For some reason at night, there can't be a lick of light in our bedroom for her to
Uh-huh.
fall asleep,
Okay.
which I think is just a thing. I
Yeah.
think she just makes it up, but okay.
Okay.
Uh, and or noise. And so we oftentimes either end up sleeping in separate bedrooms or I come in, like I'll watch TV outside or in the living room, then come in so I'm not disturbing her. So I think this will be very helpful for her. And it's probably a better habit for me to get more than on average 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep.
Yes.
Per night.
Now hold on. I'm curious with the light thing. So do you watch TV while she's in bed? Is that
Yeah.
what you and you'll just be like, hey, sorry, the TV's on, deal with it?
Well, I've transitioned to like an iPad that I'll put on, like I'll like roll over
Oh
and I'll
yeah.
put it on low, or sometimes I'll put on the in my
Yeah.
ear pods so that she can't hear it, and the light
Okay.
is hopefully less disruptive. So I'm not a complete monster,
Yes.
only
Yes.
a slight one.
Yeah.
Um, but so I want to do that. One way I'm going to measure it is I'm setting some goals. So I haven't decided yet. I think it's going to be 11 o'clock. Everything's off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Mm-hmm.
done by 11 in bed. I have watched what I'm going to watch. I played on my phone what I'm going to do. And 11 o'clock, it's lights out. So I think the accountability will happen very naturally for my wife. Like this is happening.
Yep. Yep.
But I think the other thing you mentioned there is goals, right? Like what goals are you setting for yourself? So like you had them, which is good. I'm having mine, which are good. I think people make resolutions that are not necessarily very specific or goal related,
Yes. Yes.
which can be another reason why they don't happen as much. Now mine's a bit easier. It's like, I know what I need to do. I know how to do it. I just need to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need to turn my brain off.
Uh, I have some feedback. I have some suggestions for you.
Go.
There is an app, and I hope that Jen listens to this so she makes you do
Uh-oh.
it. There's an app called Way of Life,
Yes, I'm
and
familiar with it. I think you've told me about this way back.
yeah, I've used it for years, and it's never made a difference because I don't do anything with it. But it'll
Okay.
ping you. You say at 11 o'clock, I want you to ping me, and I have to rate my day. And so you do like green light or red light. I'm going to bed right now. And at the end of the week, you
Okay.
can look back and go, okay, I made it, whatever, 5 days out of the week. And then, what I would say to make it work is you have to tell Jen, like, what's the number? Because
Oh,
Jen might
shit.
fall asleep and you could just watch on your iPad.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And the second thing I would tell you is you have to replace the iPad with a book. So you need to, because you have a
Oh, God.
behavioral
I would
pattern,
pass out so quickly if
right?
I
You have
was
a
reading a
behavioral
book.
pattern that when you go to bed and your brain's running, you're like, oh, I'll just watch a little bit of a show to help go to sleep. If you replace it with reading, you're more likely to fall asleep without needing the iPad. You're welcome, Jen.
Ugh. Can't believe you did that
That
live on a show.
uh-huh.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, and there's an upside too to reading more. And I do tend to pass out a bit more quickly if I'm reading something.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll have to give updates on the show, Dave, on how we're doing with our New Year's resolutions.
And you'll be able to see my new aesthetic, hopefully, in every episode. Although I really thought this was a more professional aesthetic until I realized that it does have a hoodie, doesn't it?
It does, but it does look like a softer, more professional hoodie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, if you have any feedback for us, if you have any ideas for shows, or if you'd like to share with us some of your New Year's resolutions and how you plan on actually accomplishing them, please feel free to either comment here where you're watching it or send us an email at shrinkspaceshow@gmail.com. Of course, please send Dave a lot of feedback throughout the course of the year on his aesthetic.
Yes.
Provide him with thumbs up or thumbs down on what he's wearing. You know, this show could quickly turn into like a fashion show for you,
Yeah.
Dave.
What's in your closet?
I like the little shimmy you did with it too. It was nice. All right, Dave. Anything else for the good of the cause?
No, thank you, Rob. That was good. Good talking
All
with you.
right. You as
All right.
well. See everyone later.
Later.